පේන්ට් කරන්න සහාය අවශ්‍යද? පේන්ටි TC ගයිඩ් එකක් නොමිලේම ලබා ගන්න මිස් කෝල් එකක් විතරක්ම දෙන්න.
It is now important for the Sri Lankan authorities and creditors to closely coordinate and make swift progress towards a debt treatment that restores debt sustainability under the EFF-supported program. The President's recent open letter to official bilateral creditors includes commitments to transparency and comparability of treatment for all external creditors, which should help facilitate this process. IMF staff will continue to assist the authorities with creditor coordination in line with IMF's policies. We emphasize the importance of anti-corruption and governance reforms as a central pillar of the EFF-supported program. They're indispensable to ensure the hard-won gains from the reforms benefit the Sri Lankan people.
When are we expecting the first tranche to come through for Sri Lanka?
The first tranche will be made available soon, in the next 2 days or so. And going forward, disbursements will be tied to reviews that take place every 6 months.
You have said in your statement that Sri Lanka needs to make quick progress on debt treatment. Will that also include the inclusion of local debt?
In Sri Lanka's case, the debt is not yet sustainable, but with financing assurances that have been provided, it is seen to be sustainable on a forward-looking basis. And that is a debt treatment consistent with these targets. So it is up to the authorities to find a way how to meet these targets and ensure that it is met. So whether local debt is included in there or not is for the authorities to set out.
What are the targets that the IMF has put on the debt treatment procedure for Sri Lanka when they talk with their private and sovereign creditors? So
the debt stock of Sri Lanka should reach 95% of GDP by 2032. That's the first one. The second one is to have gross financing needs below 13% of GDP between 2027 and 2032 on average. And that would be down from a high number of more than 34% of GDP in 2022. And the third target is to have the central government's annual debt service in foreign currency below 4.5% of GDP in every year between 2027 and 2032. And that's down from more than 9% of GDP in 2022. The question of what is next in the debt restructuring process. So Sri Lanka, with the aid of their legal and financial advisors, now needs to present a debt restructuring strategy, and it has committed to do that by the end of April. And this strategy it would use to approach its creditors to negotiate restructuring consistent with these targets. Reaching these targets would mean that we would consider the debt sustainable.
what levels of inflation and growth for the country?
The authorities and IMF agreed to have a target around the band between 12% and 18% by end of 2023, with a midpoint of 15%. If the actual inflation is not within this band, there will be consultation either with staff or with the IMF Executive Board. That's how the inflation target and consultation and review are constructed for this program.
Now, the trade unions in Sri Lanka are opposing the new tax policy of the government, and they are urging the government to amend the policy. Recently, trade unions carried out an island-wide strike against the payee tax as well. Now, the government has informed the trade unions that it will consider changes to the tax policy after the first review of the IMF program. What is the IMF's official stance on this? Will those changes, if they are made, affect the agreement between the government of Sri Lanka and the IMF?
We understand the hardship of the people in Sri Lanka that they're experiencing at this time. Talking about the revenue, Sri Lanka is amongst the countries that collects the least amount of fiscal revenue in the world, with a revenue to GDP ratio of only 8.3% in 2021, when expenditures were 19.9%. So tax reforms are badly needed to correct this imbalance, and only with appropriate tax receipts will the government be able to fund essential expenditures and to avoid further slashing critically important outlays. So these reforms will also help to regain the confidence of creditors so that in the future they will once again finance their the gap between revenue and expenditure. The efforts to increase tax revenue should be pursued in a growth-friendly manner while protecting the poor and the most vulnerable. And it is important that those who can afford it make commensurate contributions to the financing of necessary government expenditures. The tax package the authorities have introduced include the new tax rate schedule, including the new tax rate schedule for personal income tax helps to meet these objectives. And the tax rates proposed under the authorities program are also in line with similar countries who are contributing to Sri Lanka's support package through the IMF. So it's important to remember that there are many countries out there who have income levels that's comparable or maybe less than Sri Lanka with much higher income tax rates. And so they are looking to Sri Lanka to implement appropriate reforms.
There is still confusion about whether the bailout package approved can be used for fiscal support. Could you please clarify on that?
The answer is yes, this is for the fiscal budget support. Amount dispersed in 2 days, around $303 million worth of SDR will be available for the government to use.
On exchange rate, the CB still intervenes in the market. So would you be advising against that going forward?
The authorities commit to implement flexible exchange rate, meaning that it will allow market to determine the exchange rate with the intervention restricted to adverse market conditions. And another important feature of the program is that the central bank commit to purchase foreign exchange US dollars amount of $1.4 billion US dollars in 2023. It's an outright purchase from the market, foreign exchange market. That will help rebuild the reserves. And that effort, allowing exchange rate flexibility is going to be important. And that is why the exchange rate flexibility is one important pillar of the program.